If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Lord by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the Masquerade. In this episode, we continue to unravel the mysteries behind the origins, motives and cultures of the 8 ghostly legions in the world of darkness. This episode will focus on the victims of illness that make up the Skeletal Legion. Look at them, dear explorer. So many silly billies wandering about during a pandemic. It honestly wasn't not that long ago when it seemed common sense to wash our hands and keep to ourselves if we were infected by any illness. And there they are, parading about the town, unmasked, not socially distancing, acting all is all right with the world, as if their vaccines had made them immune when I assumed it was common knowledge that vaccines increase your protection. What has this world come to, explorer? I tell you, the internet was a mistake, for it's given a platform for idiots and lies to spread their filth. I feel most sorry for the elderly and disabled, the vaccine damaged, children too, and the immune compromised, as this wretched ball of mud and blood wasn't really made for them now, was it? Now, you would think it was all orchestrated by some grander entity. I suppose the clowns that run the governmental circus are the ones to blame, but according to some problematic notes we have collected, it would seem there is some other figure pulling the epidemic strings, that individual being Mr. Bony Hands, the Skeletal Lord. That said, we are told he and those that believe this are rather mad, so it could be one crazy lie. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We should really start at the beginning and talk about his legion as a whole first. The Skeletal Legion goes by a few names: the Gaunt Legion, the Legion of Bones, and the Legion of Pestilence, whose members and residents are referred to as the Sickies. For simplicity's sake, I will stick to the Skeletal Legion if you don't mind. The Skeletal Legion is a legion whose members consist of victims of sickness, malnutrition, or pestilence. Bacterial and viral infections, cancer, starvation, dehydration, radiation sickness, genetic defects, and long-term chemical damage are all part of this too, unless they were deliberate attempts at suicide or murder. As such, the likes of poison and animal bites do not count. Depending on the application, they are drafted into the Emerald or Silent Legion. Those that died from heart attacks and strokes are not accepted either unless it was part of a chronic illness. Similarly, with comas, our records state that those are dealt with on a case-by-case basis. Usually, those that are dying of illness know they are and have had time to put their affairs in order, make amends for past transgressions, and prepare themselves for that crossing over. It means they have been told to their face they are going to die. Many go kicking and screaming, but they would eventually know that it is coming. Naturally, not everything can be resolved, even more so than most. It's the sad truth of the world, unfortunately. Those are reflected with the Sickies having weaker passions and fetters. As discussed before, the Skeletal Legionnaires reside within the Spine, home to the Skeletal Lord of the Skeletal Legion, which sits on one of the lowest of the 7 hills that loom over its district, much less than the other citadels. All of the walls of this sad district are bone white, a trade secret of the Artificers, one of the many guilds. No doubt bones were involved somehow. Poor jokes aside, there is little we at the Phoenix Institute know about such a domain, but its politics and people are pretty much the playthings of the Lord of Pestilence, the Lord of Bones, the Gaunt Man, Mr. Bony Hands, the Skeletal Lord. The Skeletal Lord resides in the Tower of Bones, governing the Seat of Dust, all of which is most definitely made of bone. I had read once that the Skeletal Lord is rarely found in the throne room itself, which is why the Seat of Dust has this name, allegedly. While most of the seats feature a way for their Legion members to reconnect with and resolve their passions and fetters, the Seat of Dust is unique in that it is purely for Legion business, both military and civil. We have found he usually wanders around the room and looks over his corner of Stygia from a balcony, whilst another wraith, or wraiths, dictates everything the Skeletal Lord says and does in a journal of bones, which is sometimes called the Annals of Pestilence. No doubt it is filled from page to page on philosophical diatribes of disease, as well as every member's dealings with the other legions. He is said to go through 1 volume a week. As for the Lord himself, he is said to assume the form of a robed skeleton wearing a crown that is meant to be simple in design. He carries a staff, and some strange notes we collected once said he has far too many joints in his fingers. It wouldn't surprise us if this was all a facade, which only makes his true appearance all the more intriguing. We do know, however, that the Skeletal Lord does assume the persona of a distant, if courteously polite man. This drops when he begins one of his many rants and is said to perform many a wild gesture, much like one would expect to find in great Roman oratorial tradition. I can see you have noted that Mr. Bony Hand is a little unhinged, to say the least. He certainly is not a stable individual, which is a bit more concerning when I tell you he is one of the more powerful of the Death Lords, and certainly the most dangerous. The Skeletal Lord believes he is the incarnation of the biblical pestilence, which you may know is to be one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. He views Charon as death, leader of the horsemen. It is only the absence of Charon that presents him riding into the skinlands of his brethren. Fortunately, his megalomania hasn't sullied his political view. We know he, the Skeletal Lord, is allied with the Ashen Lady and Quiet Lord of the Iron Legion and Silent Legion respectively, most due to their aligned disputes over souls, often acting as a subtle advisor to both. Not subtle enough, as we managed to find out, but that is neither here nor there. The Gaunt Man, the Skeletal Lord, is meant to be allied with the Beggar Lord and is attempting to work on allegiance with the Emerald Lord, but you know from our conversation regarding the Emerald Lord that is highly unlikely to occur, despite the fact he sends military aid should the Legion requires it. On the contrary, the Skeletal Lord has a bitter animosity towards the Smiling Lord of the Grim Legion, simply because he rules the largest 2 areas of Stygia. Whilst the Skeletal Lord is rather hush-hush about this, our research has led us to believe there is constant espionage afoot. As you could expect, the Skeletal Lord has little tolerance for the renegades, simply because of their natural disdain for Charon and his laws. The Legion makes habit of hunting them down, usually in a literal sense, but often to bring them in trial where they are either enslaved or destroyed via Soulforge. If it is just hierarchy policy the renegades are protesting about and not Charon himself, they are ignored. Old Bony Hand knows some discourse is needed to push society forward for better or for worse. With the heretics, the Skeletal Legion and its lord have a more accepting stance on them. This makes sense, given the Gaunt Man believes he is the literal embodiment of a biblical metaphor. Obviously, speaking about religion is against Stygian policy and is discouraged, but holding those beliefs is not considered to be a crime worth prosecuting in the Skeletal Lord's eyes. On the topic of beliefs, the Skeletal Lord believes those within his rule must adhere to the dicta mortem, the rule that states wraiths are not to interfere with immortal matters. You would think that was to uphold the most important of Charon's policies. Now, this may be true, but the main reason behind this ethos is because Mr. Bonyhands believes disease is the will of God and needs no help from the dead. This rule was only introduced in the early 20th century, which is most terrifying when you think about it. The Skeleton Lord would claim about his proud work, most notably the Black Plague. Is this part of his madness, or is he and his ilk really responsible for such plights? We have no way of telling. Yet. Having waffle aside, the Skeletal Legion's views on the dicta mortem also speaks volumes about the Legion's attitudes towards the guilds, or to be more precise, the use of certain arcani. Argos, Castigate, Inhabit, and Molliate are actively encouraged to be taught, and guild practicing these tend to be left ignored by Legion members. Fatalism, Keening, Phantasm, and Eurycy are not appreciated as much. Embody, Imitation, Lifeweb, Outrage, and Puppetry are forbidden, and anyone caught using them are punished with enfrollment. Flux and Pandemonium are also supposed to be forbidden, but we have heard rumours that there are secret organisations within the Skeletal Legion that research and study these. It is said that many of the Skeletal Legion wraiths are happy to be dead. Their last few days, weeks, or even months were spent lying in a bed begging for their pain to stop, strapped up to some machine, or all gross and sweaty in their pyjamas. Then, one day or night, it did. I suspect some feel better off because of it. There are some sad wraiths within the Skeletal Legion that believe that certain illnesses are more desirable, like it is a competition or trendy. It is a gross practice, I have to admit. Non-military members of the Skeletal Legion, unsurprisingly, exist within a highly compartmentalized society, with many departments covering every aspect of work and play. The Skeletal Lord enjoys coming up with more and more ways to sort out his subjects, and frequently creates new departments to reflect his latest ideas, some of which are then immediately disbanded or merged within other groups as new inspiration strikes. The Department of External Affairs consists of the wraiths who represent the skeletal armies to outside groups, acting as ambassadors, and their staffs represent the Legion, not only to the other legions, but the renegades and heretics. They also attempt to coordinate actions of the other legions, are the focus of daily routine. The Department of Internal Affairs falls under the command of the Skeletal Legion Civil Services, though many of its senior officials come from the military. Select marshals may become Inspector Generals for Internal Affairs. They visit the various necropoli to oversee the activities of both civilians and military, seeking out corruption in the ranks, whether from cheating reports, embezzling oboli, hoarding supplies, or siphoning off fools slated for the soul forges. They provide primarily investigations of charges of treason or disloyalty, determining whether to resolve matters locally or refer the charges up the line, even as far as Stygia. These Inspector Generals also concern themselves with morale within the ranks, interviewing many of the lower echelons as to their attitudes towards their leaders and to their fellows. They also do the boring paperwork to make sure no one misses the opportunity to join the Skeletal Legion, for lack of a better phrase. You can imagine the power and fear they wield. One bad word and even the mightiest Anacreon might find themselves fatally reorganized. Legion constables flip-flop between military and civilian affairs. Technically part of the military, they have a mission to police both sides of the Legion, wielding the authority to call heavy troops when situations get out of hand. They investigate criminal activities reported to them, working hard to uphold their image as righteous protectors. The Department of the Crimson Trefoil, otherwise known as Research and Development, studies and compiles information on mortal diseases. This is the one exception the Skeletal Lord has to not allowing anyone to reach across the Shroud. They gather every mortal pathogen and illness they can find in order to develop an exhaustive body of information on diseases to help Legion members understand what killed them, knowledge often instrumental in resolving fetters or passions. The Crimson Trefoil supports itself and extra money for the Legion by charging curious wraiths or other legions for the information. Legionnaires who do not hold governmental jobs fall under General Services. This sector includes shopkeepers, street cleaners, entertainers, etc. It also includes the likes of unemployed, the petty criminals, and so forth. Such compartmentalization exists in the Skeletal Legion's armies too, but on a far more extreme scale. This is partly due to Mr. Bony Hands' love for rules, policies, and cataloguing, but a lot of it, in my opinion, comes from the fact that not everyone in the military was a fighter. That said, the single largest killer of soldiers during the 20th century was in fact disease. The excessive do's and don'ts of military service help said wraiths get a grip of their new existence and, in fact, gain some control of their fates. At the very top, you have the General Overlord, who commands the entire Skeletal Legion from his personal headquarters in Stygia or field command post. This is a figure whose identity remains unknown and is only ever addressed as the General Overlord. What we do know is that they are said to be a brilliant military tactician with many Skinlands battles to their credit, as well as a long list of underworld military victories to celebrate. He supposedly took office in the early 1950s. Then there is the High Overlord, who oversees 5 or so necropoli, whose base resides in the largest of those, which may well be Stygia itself. The High Overlord oversees 4 overlords per necropolis, who also takes command from the Anacreon. They command 4 to 12 companies that are located at various necropoli. Now, a company in this instance are made of a regent, marshal, and centurions who control squads of legionnaires, usually numbering at 10. The Skeletal Legion are known for their dedicated use of the longbow. Each squad has 1 or 2 dedicated bowmen, each one with a battalion that contains 1 company of trained archers. The Skeletal Lord places great value on relic longbows and pays well for that come through the Shroud. You can also identify them with their hodgepodge uniforms, leaning towards the 19th century US style uniforms, the blue coats with the white stripes sort of thing. You've probably noticed that tonight has been more about the Skeletal Lord himself, rather than the Legion as a whole, which differs somewhat from our conversation regarding the Emerald Legion last time. The Legion of Pestilence is a mini-kingdom dictated by a very Dedicated, unstable man obsessed with disease and plaguing the world. Not outright, mind you. Far too patient of a man for that. He is slow-moving and very deliberate, attacking the parts he needs to. Much like illness in general, perhaps his madness is another facade. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we will upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.